Welcome to Feminine Power Time. Turn off the chatter and tune in to what matters. This is Christine O'Reilly, your host, and I welcome you to this space where we come together every time to reimagine the way we and the world work from the inside out. And we do this by marrying wisdom with well-being and leadership, true leadership, personal leadership, leadership by harmonic defiance, leadership by embracing that we have power over our voices and choices, leadership by embracing that each one of us, you included, have the power within us to be shapers of reality, creators of cultures, first by how we live our own lives through our voices and our choices, and then in the ecosystems that we swim in and live in, from our family systems to our community systems to the teams that we work in. And then from there, the bigger ecosystems, such as our organizations, our companies, our other affinity groups that we're in. I like to call this kind of like the ecosystem leadership model, where when we look at the world, right, we're like, oh my God, how do I even affect that? There's so many things. And then we short circuit, and then we get overwhelmed. And today I am so over the moon. I like to use that term, over the moon. I don't know what it means, but it sounds kind of fun. I'm so over the moon to be inviting you to a meeting, to inviting in I think this is our fourth archetype in the series 10 that we're in here at Feminine Power Time, that is specifically focused on the feminine leadership archetypes. And this season, just as a reminder to everyone, is really, it's a response to how can we show up in these times, and really in a very both energetic and embodied way and practical way, but also in that truer, like we like to call it, like the mystical power, the power that's invisible. How can we show up in this world and be the agents of change and consciousness and creation that we know inside of ourselves we're here to be? And when we look around at the bigger things that are going on, a lot of it is happening at such an archetypal level. And if you don't know what that means, then go back to the beginning of this series where I go deep into what archetypes are and why this is a response that says, you know what, this doesn't work for us. And instead of having to rail against the machine, which can just deplete our chi like no one else's business, I always like to say we keep one eye open, our wise eye open, watching what's going on around us. And then we take a breath, and then we take a beat. And we tune in, and we respond versus react. And so today's archetype is her name, call her, is the space holder. It's a feminine leadership archetype. Remember, feminine doesn't mean man or woman. This is ancient, timeless wisdom of think yin and yang, right? That is goes back at least 2,000 to 5,000 years. This is a way that the world works. We have feminine energy, we have masculine energy, and we're in a process right now of bringing those both into balance. So instead of them operating from disharmony and distortion and the wound, we can actually operate from wholeness and from the divine. So we need to have language of what is that? What does that actually mean? And so these feminine energies, while we have language for them, it gives us a way in actual practices, which we'll dive into today as well. It'll give you a way to take what some of these things you're probably doing already, and there are aspects of it that you're working with already. But the idea is what if, if you were Wonder Woman or whatever superhero you want to be, and you had superpowers and you had tools and you kind of know how to use them, but there's a whole other level that's available to you once you have some tools and you kind of know where to work. And that's what we're doing with the archetypes. So before we invite in the space holder, I want to just take a moment, take a breath, and take a beat with you all, because my original intention with this series was to do one at each of the 8 turns. And I want to, and the 8 turns are the equinoxes, the solstices, and then the mid-cross quarter points. And because that is a way, it's just how things work on the planet. When we work in harmony with the natural cycles, things come into natural harmony. And then give you all the opportunity to, kind of play with those archetypes, each one every 40 days. So instead of optimizing for quantity here at Feminine Power Time, we optimize for quality. And that means that instead of playing the game of I have to get 2 podcasts out a week or 1 podcast out every week, is I'm actually working in a different rhythm, and rhythm creates consistency. So consistency is also important. It's not like the equinox can just decide one year, well, March 21st isn't really working for me, so I'm just going to make equinox be May 2nd. It doesn't work. There's a consistency to that rhythm that does so much for us. It settles our nervous system. It makes us feel rooted. It shifts our biorhythm to align with the Earth's biorhythm, which we're spinning around with this planet. So by doing that, it brings a level of harmony and centeredness. So my original intention was to use that as a way to bring each of the archetypes out. However, the archetypes seem to have their own timing and space. And also I just wanted to be transparent with you all. These archetypes are big energies. They're multi-layered, they're multifaceted. And I would encourage you, if you're not already familiar with or actively engaged with archetypes and the power of myth and the power of story and the power of these kinds of energies, to actually work with them in your co-creation, I'd encourage you to do so. Because once you open up to them, they have a lot to share with us, and they give us access to power and wisdom and insight that isn't outside of us, but it gives us a perspective to get out of what we could call the 3D reality, which is a lot of what we're looking at right now, is this 3D reality that's crumbling because it's rooted in fear and domination and indifference and greed and arrogance and ignorance. And there's quite a litany that we could go through that we're watching happen and be exposed. And this has been spoken of in wisdom traditions for thousands of years. So you could say, well, this is wonderful. Like, we're in this time that people are calling the Great Change. And I'm like, well, yes, that is wonderful. We are here, but it's hard. And people are suffering, and the same incongruencies that have been happening for thousands of years almost seem like they're getting worse and more amplified, because we can also see them. We didn't, 2,000 years ago, there was no Instagram, there was no 24/7 news feed. And so and that's affecting our nervous systems, right? It's every one of us. Like, I don't think anybody on the planet, unless you're just, like you're on Darth Vader's team. Not that it's a them and a they, because we're all part of the same, but it's, maybe that it's still affecting your nervous system. These archetypes can help you kind of press the elevate button. And this is what I do when I'm working with my I'm coaching a leader, is I say, we have to see the game that's being played in the 3D reality, inside the system that you're working in, inside the industry that you're working in, inside the company that you're working in. But when we got to pop up and we got to look at this from a 4th dimension or 5th dimensional level, like an elevated level where we're looking down and we're choosing to play a different game. We're not spiritually bypassing, we're not emotionally bypassing, we're not saying that awful things aren't happening, but we're stepping back and we're looking at this and saying, what is my part? What's not my part? What's real? What's not real? What do I need to stay centered? And what's my role of being a centered being at this time? And this particular archetype is going to help us a lot with that. It's also going to help us a lot with really seeing the distortions of what we value and what's been valued in the society, and how off balance it is, and giving each of us a way to start valuing the things that the space holder energy, one of the most powerful energies that we have, and one of the most underpaid, undercompensated, and undervalued in our culture, within organizations, and even by ourselves. So there's lots of goodness here. Y'all ready? Okay. Little sip of water, and I'm going to ask you to go ahead and start to slow it down here with me. I also want to say one last piece on the space holder. When I'm working with somebody individually, or I'm working with groups or with around presence, and the space holder is one of the core parts, we're working for months, years, sometimes really to cultivate the level of presence that allows us to truly show up as a presence where, I always say, grace can come through. Our deeper wisdom knows what to do, and we become a resonant instrument that can be felt and heard and seen in a way that it affects people's lives. And that could be people that you love, like your children, like your parents, like your partner, space holder, like gold in those relationships. It could be in how you show up within your job as a leader, as a team member, as a person that's just there. And your capacity to have the presence that a space holder brings gives you the power to know what to say, when to say it, how to say it. That could have a tremendous impact on a person's life. And instead of being another squawk box out there, another content creator that's just trying to pump stuff out to have their voice be heard, or a person in a meeting to have their voice be heard, but all that happens is blah, 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 wah, 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 squawk, 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 and just all of this wasted energy. To have that power to stand back and really listen, and then be guided and know what to say, when to say it, and then it comes through you in a way that people stop and they can listen. That's the kind of power we're talking about. It's the difference between being a presence in a room and performing or being productive or whatever we might say. We're going to kind of get into that. There's so much power here for you all. And it's very practical. And I could teach, I wrote all down many things I could share with you all. So I'm going to do my best to keep this to our, oh my God, we could talk for, 7 hours about this, but it would not serve you all, because these things that I'm going to start to talk about today, they take years to cultivate. Partly why, we have personal sustainability in practice at the bottom of the elevated leadership model, and then power and presence are at that heart level, is because in our morning practice, we're cultivating the capacity to be a space holder. We're cultivating our capacity to have MD presence. And if you're not having a centering practice in the morning that allows you to deeply center, it's very hard to be and access this power of space holder and really being a presence versus a squawker or an advice giver. That isn't really what people truly need in this moment. So we got to slow down here. And I'm going to trust. I said, okay, I wrote down all of these things, and I'm going to actually trust that through my practice of empty presence here with you all, I'll know which 3 things after we presence the transmission to say. And this is just last piece here before I bring the space holder in. She's like, let me in. And I've been waiting for 2 months to have the microphone. Christine, be quiet. Stop talking. Squawk, 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 squawk. See, even I could be a squawker. And now I forgot. Now I forgot So one of the other benefits of really inviting in the space holder and practicing it is you just know what to say when that needs to be said. So it doesn't mean that we don't prepare for whatever, for a meeting, for a talk, for whatever, but because we have thought about it and we've sat with it, then the moment comes when we can pick the 3 things, the power of 3, that need to be said. So I'm going to just be transparent here. I'm not sure exactly which of these three are going to come through, but I'm going to trust if you're all game for playing with me. Okay, my friends, deep breath in. Let's take a deep breath into our belly. Just slowing down and remembering that these energies are embodied. So just letting that belly soften, feeling that center of your navel. Just take one extra breath here in your body. See if you can even feel that root right there at the base of your spine. Space holder is very deeply rooted. This is like where you send the roots of yourself are like deep roots of a tree that go down deep into the earth, through the soil, granite, all the way through to that center seed of the earth that pulses. In yogic science, they call it the nod, and it is NAAD. When we allow ourselves to pulse our root with the root of the rhythm of the earth, all of those cells start to slow down. And you can feel your shoulders relax, your vertebrae relax, the space between your spine and your skull open. And just take another deep breath to allow your chest to open, your heart, which allows your solar plexus, that part that feels like you have to push your way through, where our willpower sits. Space holder doesn't work on willpower. She's very centered in her core. We have a strong core, but we're not forcing with will. Centered in your belly, open in your heart, but open in the kind of way that's, like courage meets compassion, which opens up, kind of, you can even like tilt your chin slightly up. It opens up your voice because you're deeply connected into your own truth in your belly, your own knowing. You're rooted into this beautiful Mother Earth, who's lived a lot longer than any of the Mishigas that has continued to elevate and accelerate on this planet by human design. And taking another breath and just letting your heart open and feeling your own courage, that heart fire of passion. And also feeling the cool lavender energy of compassion in your heart. Empathy and sympathy and understanding and patience. 8 facets of compassion. If you missed that episode in the Genuine Power series, I'll put a link in the show notes to it. And that opens up your throat center. And the space holder she has, if you would see the image of her, she has a spiral in her belly. She's magenta, and then she has a light coming out between her throat and her her high heart, where if you put your hands like right on your clavicle, and then where your throat is, like that area, it's like this beautiful, I always kind of like to see it as like a blue sapphire. Just that's like bringing out that energy that has a deep equanimity in it, an element of water, clarity. And then one more breath, just relaxing the logical mind and allowing, if it was your physical body, it would be your pituitary gland, which is in the front of your forehead, your pineal gland, which is in the center of your head. And if you took your fingers right behind your skull and your vertebrae meet, just kind of rub a little bit there, just opens up that whole space. And kind of touching, again, that third eye, that pineal with chair, there's also a light there. And there's a light in the pineal and a light back here where all of our hormones and emotions are regulated. And you just open those up. almost like a sunroof opening to receive. And then just also opening up your spirit body, which is like your essence. Kind of think of it like a bubble all around you. You were a fragrance or an essential oil. It's like your specific essence. And it's coming from wholeness, and it's shiny and it's radiant. Sometimes I like to think of the color of radiant gold. And here you have nothing to prove. It's all about being in your presence. So that just took about 4 minutes, you all, for us to get centered here. And if you didn't pay attention, if you decided not to do it, multitask, I'd invite you to rewind 4 minutes and just go through that again, because you should be able to hear in my voice right now and hopefully feel in your body and your being and your brain. The 3 B's, I like to use my body, your being, and your brain. It should feel slower. And it should feel lower. Space holder moves slowly. No rush. And there's a lower frequency, like a bass drum or a bass, it's a bass like the guitar, the big standing one, the boom, 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 keeping the rhythm. And I'm underlining this because to really embody space holder, people have to feel your presence. So here's what space holder has to share with us. Listen to this and see what resonates for you. Go zing, zing. But this is her transmission. Space holder. I am an empty vessel, a space without judgment. I listen, I receive, I reflect, I am present. Because I have no agenda, nothing to prove, nothing to gain or get, I can hear between the spaces to what is really being said and what is really needed. I allow what I hear, feel, and see to stir within me before I speak. The words emerge up from my core and enter the space with a deep, grounded resonance. This resonance calls people to attention. The room stills, space opens, and something new emerges that would not have been possible if we had not slowed down. In my ability to move slowly and speak strongly, my presence shifts a room, elevates perspective, and drops us deeper into our bodies where truth lives. From this space, the human heart opens and the path forward reveals itself. So I'll just share that one more time and pick out a sentence or a word a phrase that really strikes you as like, you know what, this is something I'm hearing right now. And I'm going to take this and work with this and contemplate with this in my daily life. Like I've mentioned, these archetypes, there's so many layers to them. And when I'm working with this with an individual or I'm working it with a group, one practice we use, it's been very effective, is just choosing one part that feels most important. And it will do what we like to call the zing zing, bing bing. And as I'm looking at the picture here of the space holder, I mentioned she has the spiral in her belly, this bright light coming out of her heart and her throat, right in between her eyes and her forehead. But she also has one at her hand and right in the middle of her palm. And so as I read this the second time, part of the reason we're going through these archetypes is because this supports us as co-creators to shape brighter realities for ourselves, for those that are in our care, for those that we can influence, and for the systems that we are part of. And that light in the center of the hand is often called the yod, Y-O-D, and it is the place where we are the expression of divine energy, whatever that is to you. Call it the universe, call it God, call it spirit. Just don't call it some white guy standing up in the sky somewhere telling us what to do. But really that creative spirit that is within us, that is rooted in energies like love and light and beauty and harmony and peace. It's not woody hooty doody doody language. Those are real things, deep. I mean, imagine right now with me a society, a culture, a world in which we are creating and shaping, like as if we were sitting down making pottery or any kind of art. What we created harmony. It created peace, sustainability, love, compassion, inclusivity, all of these things, but we have to embody them ourselves first, which is why I always say this is leadership from the inside out. If we aren't embodying the energy of what we want and choose for our family systems, our team systems, our company systems, our community systems, if we're not embodying it, we can't bring it. It's just mental chatter and banter or platitudes or prescriptions or someone telling you what to do versus you feeling that within yourself. And this isn't about I can only feel harmony. Oh, I can only feel beauty. No, of course not. Like, this is the beauty of being human. Like, we have to understand the flip side, the shadow side of the light in order to create from that. It's like having dirt in your garden that has no nutrients in it, and we work with that matter, but we know to bring the nutrients in, and we know which weeds to pull because we've lived and we've had this path. So that's what the space holder is opening for you as we go into this, and to consider, as I read this one more time, that the space holder is both who you embody, and it's who you are for others. And it's also that you yourself get to receive space holders, that you get to create for yourself, and that you get to have space held for you. So many people I know, and I have been this way in the past, but not for many years, haven't had space holders for me. I'm holding space for everyone else. And that's not going to work in these times. All right, you ready? Space holder. I am an empty vessel, a space without judgment. I listen, I receive, I reflect, I am present. Because I have no agenda, nothing to prove, nothing to gain or get, I can hear between the spaces to what is really being said and what is really needed. I allow what I hear, feel, and see to stir within me before I speak. Say that one more time. I allow what I hear, feel, and see to stir within me before I speak. The words emerge up from my core and enter the space with a deep, grounded resonance. This resonance calls people to attention, the room stills, space opens, and something new emerges that would not have been possible if we had not slowed down. In my ability to move slowly and speak strongly, my presence shifts a room, elevates perspective, and drops us deeper into our bodies where truth lives. From this space, the human heart opens and the path forward reveals itself. Can you see how valuable this archetype is right now? And I'll just intuitive illuminate it for y'all here in case not. We cannot create for ourselves, with others, this world from our mental mind. Our mental mind only knows what it's seen before or it's seen other people do. And the faster that mind goes and the smarter it thinks it is, the more destruction it will create. If we want to create a world in which the human heart is awakened, and we create a reality in which people and beings on this planet are safe and secure and have their basic needs met so that we can truly prosper and flourish, then we need access to our own internal wisdom, to our higher consciousness, and our own hearts. And so then that's where, if we can deeply listen and deeply have what's called empty presence, and I'm going to share that in a moment, the definition of it, and allow it to come through, that's with the space holder plus the intuitive illuminator in the feminine leadership model. Space holder sits in the south, intuitive illuminator sits in the north, and in the center is us, our heart, our integrated selves, body, mind, heart, and spirit. So that intuitive illuminator and space holder, they see things and they can give voice to things that others without those two don't happen. Okay, I love this so much. Let's see where we go from here. I know where we go. Okay, all right, hold on. Everyone, we're halfway through, so let's just take a little breath here. What's important for us here as we pause halfway through is I want to speak to the value of this part, because this is a big piece of these archetypes. Just going back to why we started this series, is that these are things that space holders, things you're already giving. You know, the way that you listen, the way that you reflect, the way you show up as a presence with the people that you love, with the people that you lead and influence, with the people even, on the bus or in a moment, and within the systems that you live in, swim in, that you show up as a presence, or that you really create space for people to be heard and share, is so valuable. And it's not valued, compensated, or even recognized publicly in our systems, in our jobs, in our paychecks, in our way that we even value our own time. So we're going to start there. And then I'm going to share a couple practices that you can take this and kind of play with it. How does that sound? And see what happens, and see what you learn about space holding and how you can even access more of this energy. But if we don't start with the value piece, we'll lose the whole purpose of why, because space holder is one of the most devalued, probably along with intuitive, the intuition is the most devalued in our current culture. So let me say a couple of things about space holding, and maybe I'll tell a couple stories here. So have you ever known somebody, or even yourself, who gets feedback these are some real stories, one of a client that I work with, she's been told again and again within her company that she has the best running team, that her team is it's the best team in all of this company. And she and I do a lot of things have done a lot of things for that to happen. We do cyclical power pausing and planning with them. We've worked with the Enneagram for 3 years with them to elevate all of their consciousnesses in different ways. There's more compassion, more trust, and that was all work that we did to get there. Plus, she's naturally a really good space holder and a very good catalyst and a good advocate for the people on our team. And so she's really invested in them also growing and elevating as well. So that combination is what makes that happen. So do you think that she gets paid more for that? Do you think that she's valued more as an executive because of that? Yeah, no. Yeah, no, she gets paid less, actually, than people that are in positions that are executives that might be running finance or might be running technology. And even though she's a way better at space holding, and then all of her team, because of the work that they do, they're space holding for all of the people within the organization. It's part of their role that they have. And so they're touching almost every person that comes into and stays within the organization and holding space for them. So not only has her team not had anybody leave in the time I've been working with them, almost 4 years, they also keep other people there in the right positions, happy and engaged. So much benefit to the business, because to actually replace somebody costs a lot more money than keeping somebody and getting them into the right place. Do you think that those people are paid more and are acknowledged because of that? No. When it rolls up to the business, it's like, how many people did you hire? Or how many people did you do this for? What was the number and the bottom line? And there's nothing wrong with the bottom line. But why I'm sharing the story with you is because part of my work with her is how do we make this visible, not to manage up, to be like, I have to manage up and be seen, but to actually both receive the recognition that her and her team should receive, but also to bring that value forward to make the invisible visible within the organization itself. And so I'm bringing this forward because this is one example, in a business setting where that happens. But you can apply this to other places that are traditionally where space holding is happening all of the time, but you have people in professions that have to be technically excellent at what they do. But if they didn't have the capacity to also be really powerful space holders, then they wouldn't be excellent at their job. But as a culture, overall, those people get paid way less than people who are movie stars or sports stars. So for example, people who are nurses, therapists, teachers, healers, advisors in college or in high school, these people, they're a big part of their job, or even team leaders, this person I was just describing, who's a team leader. The best team leaders are amazing space holders. Well, the best nurses and doctors and therapists and advisors and coaches and all of those people are really good space holders. But a therapist who has to go through many, 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 many different levels of training and an ongoing training gets paid so much less than somebody who is a CEO or is a programmer, and nothing wrong with being a programmer. These are all, but they're technically, right, or an engineer, and there's nothing wrong with those people being paid well. But when it's in the opposite direction of the people who are actually holding space for the mental and emotional and physical health of our society, who are holding space for children, who are not just teaching them math, but also are helping them become better people and making sure that they're safe. We just got to take a moment and take a step back and be like, that value system is off. I have a dear friend who has her PhD from one of the best psychology, places in the world, and she struggles to make more than $50,000 a year. That's crazy pants, because when it comes to insurance, what she gets paid is hardly anything, because that's the way the system is built. And let's not get started on teachers. I'm thinking of another woman in our community who's, she's just I'm just done. I'm done. And she's teaching these beautiful 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and teaching them how to calm their nervous system. And just imagine being 5 years old and knowing how to calm your nervous system. And not only does she not get paid like a person who might be working in the business world, but she also isn't even valued. She gets feedback from people saying, don't teach my kid how to breathe. She's like, really? So we're so upside down in this society. And I want to just say to anybody, I'm not discounting that all people who are technically excellent at what they do and who are really amazing space holders should be paid the best in our society. I mean, imagine that for a moment. It's like, you were not only paid based on being able to be technically excellent and getting to our goals, but you were also paid because of your capacity to be a great space holder and inspire and motivate and support people to grow and evolve and creating humans that were compassionate, courageous humans. Just imagine that for a moment with me. And how might that be true in your life, where we could just start to imagine that and we can value that? And I'm going to bring that then down into ourselves, where, like, for those of you who space hold as a parent or as a partner or for your parents in their transition, or for anyone in a community. I think of Noah going to Mankind Group every Monday in the space that he holds for the men that are there. Or Noah also volunteers for a group that works with 7th and 8th grade boys or growing men to be, every Wednesday, and hold space for them to be able to get in touch with their emotions and it to be a safe experience. I think he does get like a very small stipend, like $25 or something for every hour he goes there. But that again comes back to like, wow, like, how are you holding space in those ways that aren't being paid? When I look at it, it's like, we're like, that's not the place that our livelihood is going to come from, but other ways that we do receive money for our livelihood pays for that to happen. And we do it because it's the right thing to do. And the society is backwards right now. But, every time that Noah goes off and he's doing those things every Monday, every Wednesday, like, I'm supportive of that because I want there to be good men and space for young boys to grow into good men. I want that space to happen, and I can't wait for the outside world, the government or the education system. Like, we start that now, but not in a way that sacrifices ourselves, right? It's like, yeah, if Noah could just do that full time, that would be great, but that's not the reality we currently live in. But it's a consistent thing that we continue to invest in our time, just like my work with Wiser and with girls and young adults, and the pilots that we're doing in Guatemala right now with a Montessori school and that we've done over the last decade plus. There's no money exchange there, but it's about, I value the space being held for this age group, and I see the money I receive for other things I do as supporting that. And so I make consistent space for it, and I value it. And so in the other part of that is what I see is where people are. I was just talking to a friend whose parent has gotten sick and is taking more time and more energy for them to help that parent go through the process, to help them get better, to like have the caretaking happen. Actually, multiple people that I work with and friends. And what I always say to them, I'm like, thank you for doing that job. You are being a space holder right now, usually as well as an advocate, as well as a wisdom advisor and a coherency creator, like many of the archetypes are showing up. And so that's a job right now. So for any of you who are space holding, like, embracing that this is creating value, even if it's not paying me money. Because in that moment, we get out of the money. The money is the only way we receive value. And I do see a world in the future where we're designed around that, so people are supported in that. But we first have to value it ourselves. I see this also with friends who have had and clients whose kids have gone off to college, and they're thinking, oh, I'm launching my kid. We're going to be like an empty nester. And then lots more stuff is coming up, and they have to devote time and energy to being space holders and intuitive illuminators and wisdom advisors and advocates for their 20-year-old children. And that takes space. And then I'm also often on the other side saying, and who's holding space for you? And so being in community and them having people that can hold space for them and not just having to be the space holders also then at work all of the time in their profession. They just don't have it to give because they're giving so much to their kids. And so let's just take a breath for a moment. Little fierce feminine just needed to come out around that. And I just want to double underline that anyone who's listening, anything that I'm sharing here is not a judgment against anyone here about what you do, how you create money, blah, 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 blah. That's not what I'm saying. I have some beautiful clients who are doctors and lawyers and many other things, and they do their best to be space holders. They show up and they're present. They may not have as much time that they desire, but they're not just like tickety-tock robot, move on to the next thing. They're not just focused on productivity. They're focused on humanity. And that also is an act of harmonic defiance. We do what we can, but when we do it consciously, that makes a difference. It's not about having to do it perfectly. It's not about having to make it has to be some massive change. The intention behind what we do and why we do it, and you valuing it and you seeing in that moment that it might just be a 10-second moment where you're really present with somebody and really hear my words that your presence is enough to make a significant difference. Your presence is enough to make a significant difference. And it might just happen like we went to a party on Saturday for a guy that Noah's friends with in his Mankind group. And we also had to go to the Boy George concert. Well, we're going to the Boy George concert because I'm an XO, love Boy George Culture Club. And I saw him for the first time almost 30 years ago. And he was playing here in North Carolina. And oh my God, he was so good. And if you could see Culture Club, I highly recommend it. But I was like, we got to go all the way one way an hour and then an hour back and then an hour to Culture Club and an hour back. And Noah, drove the car, but we wanted to go to celebrate this man and his birthday. And I wrote him a card. His partner asked for us all to write a card, and I just wrote on the outside of the envelope, Anthony, remember your presence is enough and it matters. And I don't know this guy very well, but every time I see him, you all, he pauses and he connects with me and he like looks at me and he talks to me. And it doesn't even have to be, it's not like we're talking about the most significant thing in the world, but there's like a meaning and a substance to it. And he makes an effort to connect. That's the connector. But also there's a space holding that's actually happening. He's listening. And that's where we're going to go. I think I'm going to share the piece about listening and empty presence with you. And that's how we'll end today. But that moment of like just being present with somebody, it's everything. It's everything. So how can you, in small but mighty ways, both with yourself, it's my first inquiry for you here, both with yourself, or second, I guess, because I asked you which of those parts of the space holder, what to pick a phrase that you're going to work with and contemplate. I will put the definition or the transmission up on my blog so you can go there and read it. But this inquiry number 2 here is, what's a way you can become even more present with yourself? So we'll do you first. Space hold. Create more space to listen to be present with yourself. Because that's where it all starts. So in your morning practice, in your evening practice, in your weekly practice, what is a simple way you can come back into presence with yourself? And I like to, I'm touching my heart right now, I also like to feel in the divine, the universe, Mother Earth, whatever you like, I'm being held to. So then what are the spaces and places that you can put, the space or place you can put yourself into to be held and have that space held for you? Because it's important to be in those places where you can relax and just empty. I go to yoga on Fridays or on Sundays, and I trust the teacher, and it allows me to just relax. I have a bi-monthly, twice a month women's leadership group that I run, and we just drop in and we're together, and that it's been going on for almost 10 years. And this group particular that's in this shape has been together for, I think, now 5 of those 10. And so we just drop in, and that space is held for us because we've been consistently gathering twice a month and once a year in person. So like, what structure do you have in place that's going to be a space holder for you? Could also be like living with the moon cycles and the whether you join me for the personal leadership power pauses that I do with Catherine Torini, or you're part of the Feminine Wisdom Way collective, that's or wherever you get that from, that you have that space held where you can drop in and journal and reflect. That's space holding for yourself. And then the third inquiry is, how could you, or maybe there's one person, you could choose one person that you could be, or one role you play that you could cultivate even more presence of being a space holder, right? An empty vessel. I listen, I receive, I reflect, no agenda, there to really be there for what's needed. Maybe someone pops up right away, partner, a parent, child, friend. Just maybe the next month, make it short. Or maybe it could be a place, where you work, with a community you show up in. So those are our 3 inquiries so far. What's the part of the space holder you're going to contemplate, kind of chew on and play with? 2, how can you really create space for yourself? And what's the structure that would really support that? And 3, what is and who is a person or place or role that you could become, you really call yourself back into presence and be present? Just choose the next 30, 40 days to do that in and see what happens. And I think these 2 pieces that I'm going to give you, these 2 tools, 2 practices will really help with that. Okay, so we have about, I think we'll probably go about another 15 minutes or so. This is going to be the practice part here. So let's start with this. I listen, I receive, I reflect, I am present. The space holder knows that its role is to really be an empty vessel and to be a space without judgment. And just think about that for a moment. How valuable it is to have a space without judgment. A person who can be an empty vessel, who can be without judgment, a space without judgment, where you know that people aren't just going to come at you with advice and opinions and judgments. I mean, it's like gold. There's a wisdom teaching that says to be listened to and heard is so close to being loved that you can't really tell the difference. So when we show up as a space holder, even if it's in your professional life and you're really listening so that you can witness, so that you can reflect, or so that you could provide insight instead of advice, people feel loved. We might not want to use that word in our professional world, which is just so banana pants to me, but whatever. Part of it is because, there's many forms of love, and the English language only has one word for it. Other languages have like 54. Some of them have there's so many different. So let's just say people feel compassion. And again, coming back to the 8 facets of compassion, of understanding, patience, gentleness, kindness, sympathy, empathy, forgiveness, mercy. Listen to that podcast if you've missed it. We're actually we're taping this, having this discussion during the moon cycle of compassion. It's the 2nd moon of every year. And so we're in that energy right now. So if we want more compassion in the world, choosing to slow down, to be present, to be an empty vessel, to listen, to witness, to reflect, or if asked, to provide insight, is creating compassion on this planet right now. So, breaking that down, listening, we often say that I have to be a good listener, I have to be a good listener. What does that actually mean? Well, listening means, first of all, being present, being where you are, not some other place, and allowing yourself to slow down in that moment. So I've worked with parents, executives who are parents, and when they're in the busy frequency, and they've been overtaken by the busy frequency, and they have their kids, it's very hard for them to be present because they're thinking about the emails and the this and all the things they haven't done yet. And as we practice daily bookending, weekly bookending, monthly, moonly living, yearly rhythms, we start to trust slowing down more. And we start to change our relationship to time. There's a whole section in Overwhelmed and Over It, fourth section, that it's all about getting off the time grid and into living in space and rhythm. It's a real thing, really works, but you can't be a space holder if you're on the time grid. Tick-tock robot, gotta go, gotta go, gotta go. Time is money, time is money, time is money. I have a million things to do, right? So it's very hard to slow down and be present because you're like, your brain is going bananas and you can't be a space holder and you can't be present with people if you're in your mind is tick-tocking along. So when we learn to slow down, trust that slowing down, it actually slows down time. And it creates space. Like, have you ever had that experience where you're like, wow, we just had a conversation that seemed like it should have taken an hour and it was only 10 minutes. Or sometimes it's the opposite. You drop into what is called timelessness. And you thought you were talking for 30 minutes and it was like 3 hours later. But, everything still gets done that needs to get done. This is more than for our conversation today. I've done series about time and I'll be talking forever probably about time. But if you have Overwhelmed and Over It, I highly recommend section 4. And also looking through the archives, there's lots of stuff. There's like a whole series on the magic of time, practical magic of time. But to just understand or kind of, pick the relationship that you're thinking you want to bring more of this energy to. In order to listen, you have to really be receiving it. So when you're listening, it's really receiving what the people are saying. And sometimes we have to nod our head, like we're listening like a mirror. You're listening like if you were a chalice and you're just filling up, with this water that they're bringing. Not to figure out what you're going to say, but to let it wash over you and through you and trust that you'll be able to either reflect, witness, or give insight. And sometimes people like to write things down because they have a friend, Cheryl, who's an amazing, one of the best reflectors in the world. And I know when we're talking, sometimes we have like 3-hour conversations where we do slip into timelessness and we're like, wow, we're come out the other side. And it was just, we go for walks, we have coffee, all kinds of things happen. She's one of the best reflectors on the planet. But that's a way that I know that she does. She writes down little things, but she always just can reflect because she's listening deeply. And that's the part of listening, is not listening to try to find the answer, not listening to be able to tell someone what to do. It's listening from that deep place of compassion. If I want to understand and I want to be able to empathize with this person without falling into whatever their drama might be or taking it on. So the other 3 parts that I'm saying, once the listening is, I reflect, I witness, I share insight. You can always ask people which of those they desire. This is like gold in any relationship, professional or personal. Would you like to be witnessed? Meaning that you're really acknowledging that person's experience. And oftentimes I'll just say, I really witness that. I really acknowledge that. And that could be acknowledging their struggle, their reality, the situation. But that witnessing is people feel understood and seen in that moment. So you can ask, would you like to be witnessed? That's what witnessing is. Would you like reflection? And reflection is like the mirror where you're reflecting what I really heard was. What I really heard was what I really heard was, because you're listening at a deep level and you're reflecting to them their own words, their own wisdom. These two things, the witnessing and the reflecting, are so powerful. And in our culture, we're so like, I'm supposed to have the answer. And you might have some insight for that person, but these two things are some of the most powerful things you can do because you're reflecting back to them their own energy. And then you can also ask insight. Would you like some insight, or would you like my intuition? So intuition or insight. And then you can say, for intuition, is like, I have a sense that, or I'm sensing that. That's how the intuition kind of speaks, or I'm feeling that. Or, as you were talking, I just had this like sense that, or I saw a picture of, it's like, that's how the intuition works in sensing and imagery. Or I do have an insight. I have an insight that comes, and then I always like an insight that comes from my experience, and an insight that comes from my own personal experience, an insight that comes from something I'm noticing with a lot of people right now. And so that is the practice, to deeply listen and receive, and then ask the person, would you like to be witnessed? Would you like reflection? Would you like my intuition? Or would you like some insight? And they might just say whatever you've got, and that's good. But you can educate them also on what those differences are, and then that becomes part of your relationship. And it's an amazing practice. So that's number one. I have so many other listening practices, like the 4 levels of listening, and so many other things, but we can't go into all of those. So we'll be here for 5,000 hours. So that is practice number 1. Practice number 2 is called empty presence. And this one also, when I've taught groups this, we practice this, we spend a whole hour or 2 just going into this practice, but I want to share with you what empty presence is. And this is something that if you already have a morning or an evening bookend practice, whether it's meditating, it's going for a walk without your phone, it's sitting without any external stuff, it's journaling, it's drawing, it's doing art. A lot of those kinds of things cultivate empty presence. It's a hard word to describe, but I'll tell you why I'm going to share it with you. So to truly be a space holder, to be there without judgment, or to be in a room where there's lots of squawking going on and you feel that pressure like you have to say something, but you remain kind of silent. You're not silent like you're checked out. You're more like an owl who is actively listening with all of its senses, sensing all the things, but it's in what's called active stillness. And then when the moment is right, with swiftness, it speaks. It moves into action. We've talked about this in the podcast series on the feminine. What is it? There's a podcast episode on stillness and swiftness, which I go into deeper detail on this. It is one of the most powerful power spectrums we have for knowing when to speak and knowing when to act and knowing when to stay silent and wait. And if more people practice this, we would have less noise and overwhelm in our culture, like I kind of talked about. Again, if you're a person who, has a lot to say, not judging you for it, I am encouraging everyone to consider that I allow the words to emerge up within me. And if you're like, I never have any words, there's nothing that comes, well, that's a good place to start. And it's a good place to practice of really getting curious and maybe having some support and space holding of what do I have to say. When I work with leaders around presence and really being able to make the invisible visible, that's part of our coaching work together, where I'm really listening to them and then I'm able to reflect back to them, but then also bring forward ways for them to simplify what it is that they have to say so they can say it with deep embodied power and confidence. So don't think that you should just be able to do this on your own. I'm working right now on my website, which is an example. I have a friend of mine who's also a professional in this area. We meet twice a month, and our meeting and kind of her holding space for me and then either reflecting for me or sometimes catalyzing me is me needing to have some place to speak this stuff out so I can get it out of me to then be able to put it on a website or on a page. So those words aren't going to maybe just come because you're sitting like staring at the tree, but it's about being able to allow, I always call it allow grace, to speak through me, allow me to know and be in the right rhythm, to know when to speak and know when to pull back. And that is a practice. So here is empty presence. Pulling this out from my Gather and Guide Your People training that I haven't done in a couple years, but it's partly teaching people how to be in front of a room from a place of empty presence versus having to have a 7-page agenda or have everything printed out. This is also just last part I'll say about this is that if you're a person who, whether it's a small room or a big room, it's on a stage, whatever, empty presence is like gold because you get very clear on what are the main points that you want to say. And then you can show up and you can speak to what the room, whether that's 1-on-1, that's 3-on-1, that's a room of 20 people or 100 people, because you're so integrated in yourself and you have that capacity to allow presence to emerge. So here is what empty presence means. And again, it's hard to define it in words because it's something that you have to feel and experience in your body and in the field itself, where we're in relationship to the field around us, the energy field that, again, can show up between two people, can show up in the space that we're in. But these are from one of my primary teachers, Ariel Spilsbury, who founded the 13 Moon Mystery School and is author of the 13 Moon Oracle. And this is who I learned empty presence from by being in her presence and watching what she did, which is one of the best ways to learn empty presence. In words, empty presence can be said to be a mind without thought to clutter it, a spaciousness, and a sense of profound resting in non-doing. In a culture that does everything to distract us from embodying that awareness and consciousness, it is a skill that must consciously be cultivated. The ability to actually be in empty presence is the foundation for all spiritual work, and I would say all leadership work. But what is it in direct experience? These are not just words or concepts. As with everything in the feminine mysteries, you must have a direct experience of empty presence to recognize the state of consciousness and be able to demonstrate it. And then I'll add a couple of my own parts here. Empty presence is like handing over the reins to the divine, to grace, whatever that is for you, so that you can move and respond to what is actually needed versus what your mind has previously made up or what your ego thinks it needs to do, defend, or distract you from. You can imagine yourself like a chalice that, when empty, has space to receive pure guidance and energy, which fills it and flows through it. You can also imagine yourself like an instrument in an orchestra who releases control and lets grace play through you. You will ultimately serve something more potent and powerful than you could from your individual self. And you will transmit more beauty and grace and spirit as you allow the divine to move through you. This gives you the superpower to move people deeply from their core, not through words or deeds or facts, but through your presence. Although you may use words, you might pull through facts, but they're coming through that presence. Empty presence is not showing up to lead with no prior thought, preparation, or feeling into the people that you are connecting with. When you have mastery and trust of empty presence, to know how to empty yourself and let that divine inspiration and guidance flow through, the way you create and operate requires a different kind of preparation. You create structure and flow, simmer on it, sit with what you want to create. You write, you get clear on what you really want to convey and transmit. And then when you find yourself in the actual place where you're with the people, you move into empty presence, let the structure go, and follow the field to guide you and the divine to speak through you. You still stay connected to the coordinates you set prior to the gathering or the meeting or the session, so you don't get lost at sea or take people on a Gilligan's Island like adventure. In empty presence, you are tracking and tacking to your flow, outcomes, etc., and you are surrendered to the journey of exactly how to get there. It's basically focus plus flow that you've created, and then you can be with the field as it emerges. All right, just let that kind of wash over you. I encourage you to rewind if you want and re-listen to that transmission and kind of the me getting empty presence onto one page. But what I would share with you about empty presence is if you've come to Feminine Power Time at all, that's what you're experiencing. I sit with, I marinate on, I know what the center point is going to be for any episode that we do together, any conversation. I often put many things out that I could talk about, and I sit with it. And then I distill it down to usually 3 things I know that I want to touch on. And then I let it flow from there, and I kind of let go. So I'm not coming here with no map, but I'm also letting the map go. And it's interesting to me that for Space Holder, I really had to let it go. Like, I wrote a bunch of stuff down, talked to Noah about it, been sitting with the Space Holder for a couple months now, waiting for when it was time to do this with you all. But then I had to let go and know I had this transmission that I downloaded in 2018, and I've used many times in my one-on-ones and also in my group leadership groups, but to trust that what would come out would be what would be right. And so I hope it's not in person. Being in person, that's how I really learned empty presence. My core teachers were really powerful teachers for me of empty presence, and I can feel it, and I could see them moving around the leadership archetypes, going from 1 minute to being a catalyst to the next to, being like a great mother who just was going to give you a hug and come through such compassion. And so that, I think if I was to wrap us up, and we're not going to go deep into this, but to say it, empty presence and space holding is very much connected to your essence. And your essence is unique to you. And your essence it's like the energy that comes through your presence. And so under knowing your essence, knowing your genuine essence, having language for it, having imagery of it, having a sense of it, feeling it like it's coming through your body, that you are this instrument. It doesn't come from your head. It comes from your body, comes from your heart, comes from your spirit. I think it comes from our soul. It comes from our connection to our higher consciousness, but it is embodied. And we cultivate our essence and our presence through the practices that we do. And through choosing to go into those deeper parts of us that come from a place of protection, a non-integration, old patterns and wounding that we've used to protect ourselves on this banana planet. And we take the distortions of our superpowers and we bring them into harmony. And we lean into the ones that we might need to strengthen and trust a little bit more. And that's always a practice. Every year at this time, I'll give you a last practice here, just because it feels like it's important to give to you. And I will promise I'm going to wrap this up. I guess we're always just going to be at about an hour and 20 minutes for each of these archetype ones. I should just surrender to that and stop trying to get things done faster. I'm still learning. I'm still learning how to slow down and let there be space, and not try to do, as Noah always says, you try to put 5 pounds of potatoes in a 1 pound bag. And today I had other things too that I wanted to get done today. And I just had to surrender, like, nope, it's just about the space holder. And then we're going to go to a community meeting for our local little village here. And then we're going to have dinner. That's it. That's enough. But here's the practice around space holding and presence. People can feel our judgment a million miles away, whether it's self-judgment or judgment of other and all the different variations of judgment or resentment that comes out. And we can't be true space holders and allow the power of grace to come through when we're in our own interference. And our own doubt, will also just mess up our presence. It'll make us speak when we should just really be quiet, or keep us quiet when we should really speak. And so one thing that we do every year during the Feminine Wisdom Way Collective that's connected to the second moon cycle of every year, which is connected to the power of compassion, is we choose one branch of compassion, one facet of compassion to strengthen. And the 8 facets, which are in the podcast on the 8 facets, which I will put a link into and I encourage you to listen to, are sympathy, empathy, understanding, gentleness, patience, forgiveness, kindness, and mercy. And we choose one of those that we are going to strengthen every year. And then we also choose a toxic habit that we are going to release. And we also choose an overgiving imprint that takes us out of presence, but we'll just stick with the compassions. So if there was a facet of compassion, and kind of think of it like these facets are like ways to get into the center of the full power of compassion that allows you to be non-judgmental. Remembering compassion doesn't mean condoning. It does not mean condoning. It doesn't mean being complacent. It doesn't mean turning the other cheek. It doesn't mean being the better person. It means truly invoking and embodying one of those energies, and there's an energy, and choosing to embody it and give it to yourself or give it to somebody else or to seek it. So for example, oftentimes my compassion facet has been understanding, because if I can understand something, not in my head necessarily, but more like in my heart, can I understand it? And also in some ways in my head, if I can understand it, then I can open up to get into that deeper level of compassion. Or this year, it's my facet is gentleness. And that was the message that came through my emerge process again and again and again and again, is with a gentle touch, strength through gentleness. This is antithetical to my 8 Enneagram ego. But I'm like, and then the part of me that just wants to go and is an achiever and a doer and kind of make it happen. So I am in a deep practice of strength through gentleness. Remember a gentle touch, including just before I got on with all of you, walking into the kitchen and seeing all the breakfast pans that had not been cleaned by my beautiful partner, Noah, and smell of bacon grease, and just wanted to be like, why haven't you, whatever. But instead, just One of my ways I get into gentleness is through curiosity and saying, is there a reason? Or actually not, I didn't do that this time. I just made a request. Could you do this? And I did it in a very gentle way. Could you clean this up, before you go on to the next thing? And my energy was gentle, not my words, because I can deliver those same words and it not be gentle. And then I'm not being in my presence. He's going to shut down. So what for you would be that compassion facet that you could deepen with this year? Sympathy, empathy, understanding, kindness, patience, gentleness, forgiveness, and mercy. And choose one of those and use that to help you slow down. Use that to know and help you know when to speak and when to be silent. Use that to listen, to reflect, and be an agent for this energy of compassion, which is fierce on the planet at this time. So know that your presence matters. Your presence is enough. Thank you for being here with me today. My ask and invitation is that you share this with one other person and invite them into a conversation with you. Share the inquiries, share about it, and support each other. Be space holders for each other. And to go out into the world and play with this and see what happens and notice yourself being a space holder and value it and understand that space holding takes energy. It takes intention. It takes commitment, and value it, and also acknowledge that it may mean that other things need to reflow or shift because you need the space to be a space holder in this way. And know that your presence matters on this planet, my dear. Thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to being with you when it's time for the next archetype to come through. My intention is that we will either get back on track with having it on the 8 cycle turns or one a month. We'll see, near the new moon or the crescent moon. So I got a feel into it, doing a little reflowing here, but stay tuned and make sure that you're on my wisdom letter list so that I'll let you know that it comes through and that you're also subscribed on your podcast list. And you can get onto my wisdom letter just by going to my email or to my website, ChristineArylo, ARYLO.com. All right, much love. Thanks for being you.